Hey, it's Dr. Mothan Kandula with Advent. I'm here with Dr. Ethan Handler, and we're going to talk about a few topical topics today. So, how you doing?
Hanging in there as much as I can.
So
Back at the office, in your office,
you're in
actually.
my office
I am.
with the
I am.
famous painting. The people ask me about that.
I like to prefer, I call it a tapestry.
It is a tapestry.
Exactly.
It
Reminds
actually
me of
like
Indiana.
it looks. I'm looking at it, on the screen right here because we're distanced, of course, because it's April 29th and we're in the midst of this COVID thing. But it actually looks like for the first time, it's weird. It's like three skulls looking at me over your shoulder.
That is very
It's very
strange.
abstract, but yeah.
It reminds me of a scene from Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade when they're in Germany and there's a discussion about a tapestry for some
Oh yeah.
reason. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, anyway. Well, while we're talking about the tapestry, that tapestry has been part of Advent since the founding of Advent, almost.
Wow.
Did you know that? It's
I
a
didn't.
little known history.
So
I
it's
think
almost as old as I am.
yeah, almost. No, that was we got that in 2005-ish when we opened. We were founded in 2004. We bought that to sit behind our reception desk in our old office, and so that went from reception desk. And then when we moved to our new office in 2015 or something, there wasn't any room for it behind the reception, so it's now sitting there. And now it ends up behind whoever's sitting in that office doing this sort of stuff. So everybody ends up seeing it and they comment on it. But it is actually fabric. It's not a painting. People are like, "What is that?" It's not. I think it's like some sort of silk kind of thing. I don't know. But anyway,
Yeah.
Other than the painting, how's the office doing?
The office is doing well. We are getting back up to full speed. And, honestly, it's good to be back and see patients. And a lot of the feedback I've been getting is patients are happy to get out of their house and come here. And, we talk about this, like obviously COVID is an unusual time and something that a lot of us have never seen or may never see again in this capacity. But life goes on and people still have problems and need to treat those problems. And so it's like, I've had multiple patients say they have actually, for those that are working from home, have said they are working harder and longer hours, and it's more challenging to work from home than it actually is at the office. And so there's this yearning to kind of get back to some of what they did before because it breaks up the day and just changes things up differently for them.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I would say at least for us, for those that don't know, I mean, so we're based out of Milwaukee and we shut down for a couple weeks solid completely, and then gradually are opening back up very, very gradually. But then there's been in order to do what we do from a medicine standpoint, we had to go virtual, which we hadn't done before. And so there's been, I mean, at least for me personally, I've worked it's different work, harder work, I would say in a way, because it's constant. The connectivity is constant, but you also for me, when I'm working, it's almost like a sense of guilt if I'm not, working. And then it's different. Like right now, we're virtual. We're usually not. When we do this, we're usually sitting in the same room, which sounds like this should be almost the same thing, but it's not. It actually, and I was reading and I think about this myself. When you're sitting here, and I'm actually right now staring at this camera. There's no room for like you've got to like sort of stay locked in, and that gets tiresome. Like you can't, like in normal day-to-day life, you're interacting and then you can kind of do your thing. When you're doing this or Zoom call, which is like we do Teams, which is like the Microsoft version of a Zoom call, but it's you've got to be here and be present with you and your computer, and it's tiresome. So yeah, I mean, I think once we open the office back up, and we've been just seeing limited patients, just CT patients, so patients we can see kind of from a distance. It was refreshing to get back to doing what we do. And then I think at least from, what my patients were telling me, yes, it was almost like it was an ability to interact socially versus a doctor's appointment. And they were appreciative of that. And then I'd say same thing with the virtual, which is, it sounds like it's people are appreciating any semblance of real normal interactions.
Yeah, I mean, I think that certainly As we think about long-term effects of what this does and how the virtual consult and visit will play a role in healthcare moving forward, it's there's something that's still very important in engaging about the human interaction with somebody, like physically, like talking with them versus something on camera and over a virtual environment like this. And so I think appropriately it will play a role. Is it going to be as big? I think people are going to have a little bit of like virtual Zoom fatigue, at the end of this, and crave kind of what we had before to a certain extent. And obviously, as long as we're doing it in a thoughtful way that's safe and whatever, we can move forward and get back to kind of reconnecting as humans in person, certainly.
Yeah, and that will be good.
It will be very
It'll
good.
be good. I mean, honestly, it's like, oh well. So there have been other pandemics in the history of the world, many, 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 lots of, and that's, I mean, so that's not new. But I'd say the world's reaction to this is new and unique and one of a kind, never happened before. So nobody knows what the back end is going to look like. Like we all have this sort of vague sense, and I think each of our heads, but there's no track record to go off of. There's nothing like, you can't say, well, after the 1918 pandemic, life did this, because nobody's ever done this ever in the history of the world. Nobody's ever locked down an entire world population of healthy people. Every other pandemic was locking down the folks that were impacted, and everybody else kind of went about their lives and lost their fingers that they didn't catch whatever it is that was going around. So I think, though, yeah, it'll be interesting how things play out, because it's almost easier to lock things down than it is to unlock it, which it's a weird thought. And I don't know that, like, so this is all theory, like, meaning this lockdown is a theory, never been put into action. The theory or the thinking that went into that didn't go past the thinking of, boy, if you got an infectious disease that spreads at close proximity, if you separate civilization, that might decrease the spread. That all sounds theoretically good. And then they were like, probably, Joe, epidemiologist, was like, man, that's great. We did great work here. We're going to recommend this, next pandemic. But then, Jane, epidemiologist, didn't then come in and say, well, what happens after the storm? What's the next? Nobody knows. So I would say that the challenge here is, like, we are living in a multi-series, episode or multi-episodic series. We're through part 1, and nobody's written part 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And so there's something called unintended consequences, which is any action is going to lead to a consequence. And some of those are like, okay, you hit a ball, the ball's going to fly. Okay, that's an intended consequence. Unintended consequences are things that happen that you don't have any idea. And I'd say, like, every moment of life moving forward from this sort of unlocking the lockdown is going to be some version of an unintended consequence. So it'll be interesting.
Yeah. I mean, there's just no way to know and predict the downstream effects for the immediate, lockdown. And obviously a lot of this was, so the difference, obviously it being this day and age versus 1918 is, there wasn't Twitter, there wasn't this massive amount of information that could get disseminated so quickly. That's both a wonderful thing and also can be a dangerous thing, and certainly different messaging can get amplified pretty quickly. And so it just changes everything. I imagine in 1918, if you're printing something in a newspaper, it takes days for that to get disseminated. And so cities have their ability to kind of lock down, but like, it's just not this interconnected world as to what's going on and what's real and what's not. And I think that as we've talked through things, and even as a specialty, because obviously, okay, hey, this is the head and neck, and guess what? Everybody knows that SARS lives in that area and that anatomy. Sorry, not SARS, COVID, lives in that area and anatomy. And so our specialty in particular looks at is an area that we have to deal with this on a more frequent basis. And so we have to take all of this data and information that's out there and come up with a way that's safe, but also calculated and understands what we're doing and how to get back up and running and treat those patients. I mean, And I feel like we've done that. You know, yes, we did close down for a couple of weeks. There are other ENTs that stayed open, but I think certainly the positive of that is it allowed us to bring together all that information, roll out a plan that was thoughtful, that did these things that we're talking about to try and have intended consequences to us closing down and then reopening. If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. I mean, I guess we've got to do what we've got to do, with the information that we have, which is good. I mean, and it's just, we'll move forward. Yes, I think there's, well, what's happened, and what will happen moving forward will happen moving forward, and you can't dial the clock back,
Right.
kind of a thing. But I would say, yeah, at the end of the day, I think everybody is chomping at the bits to just get some even little glimmer back of the life that we left. And then I would say prior to, let's just go back to January, that all those things now that we're looking forward to getting back to, everybody took those things for granted back before this happened.
Mm-hmm.
And then likely, is how life goes, is at some point, maybe July, maybe December, maybe next year, we'll start taking those things for granted again. And so it's just that's how the human mind works, which is okay, but it does sort of accentuate the negative when you're in the midst of it. So
Right.
Yep. Yeah. What else is shaking?
How have the virtual visits gone for you? I mean, have you done any of those or no? Haven't had any yet.
No.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of memes out there, and certainly, it's good. It's allowed us to kind of connect with patients, but again, there's the technology component to this, and certainly depending on one's age and ability, I mean, it can be challenging at times, certainly, but helpful in others, I guess. But it is hard to do an exam virtually, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Especially, the other day I was doing one and the patient couldn't hear very well, and so I got to look down their ear canal for most of the most of the virtual visit as they were talking to me, or I was talking to them. So they can.
Although, I mean, I've said this, internally, but I would say, and I think we all know this, or I think this is so much of medicine is in our ears, meaning in our brains. Like so much of what's going on is kind of Sherlock Holmes taking the clues that come to you. And I say this internally when I'm talking to anybody that'll listen, but when your physical exam is almost always confirmatory, meaning that like somebody comes in or doesn't come in. Now it's virtual. So somebody's sitting in their own home, you're sitting wherever they are, at our office or at your own home, and talking to them. And so it forces you to separate those two things out distinctly versus all other practice of medicine prior to this was always linked, the history taking, which is just us talking to somebody, and the exam. Those things went hand in hand. And now all of a sudden it's like, okay, we got history, and then we get this modified virtual exam. And so now you really have to rely on your history taking. But at the end of the day, I would say what I think is going to happen is that talking to somebody and trying to understand what's going on with them, even without physically being able to see some of the areas that we need to see in the moment, we will see them eventually, that when they actually come in the office and we can see those areas that we can't see online, that those areas are going to be, that you're going to have a hypothesis in the virtual world, and that's likely going to be proved more often than disproved when you see that patient in person. So actually, I guess what I'm saying is like it's a weird thing right now. It's strange for everybody, but there's going to be a value add. It'll actually make us better clinicians having to do this. And I almost would say that's true for everything we do in medicine. If you have to do it in the face of challenge, I'm talking everything, whether it's history taking or even surgery, if you have to do something without your favorite tool and you got to figure it out, then you're a better surgeon after that surgery.
Mhm.
And then you also then appreciate that favorite tool the next time, that it comes back. So it's got that the absence thing, but I feel like and maybe this kind of ties into the COVID talk we're having before, is that, when something goes away, you recognize how important it is, but then you also have to have ingenuity and grit to figure out a way to make it happen without that thing. And then, then sort of when that thing comes back, if it comes back, you're a different person and hopefully a slightly better person. And so all of a sudden that thing you were missing is coming back to you, that's changed, and the thing might have changed in the interval, if that makes sense. I mean, like, time is constantly moving forward. And so some of these things that come in front of us change us. I mean, I guess we're always changing constantly, but if it's a challenge, you're changing toward the positive, hopefully. And it's like, okay, that's kind of it's cool in the abstract. It sucks in the moment. I think it's the truth of it.
Oh, I hear what you're saying. I mean, it's good to deal through adversity, and again, it's like it's a virtual visit. We can manage that. But I think from an admin standpoint, one, it allows us to reach a lot more patients who want to see us that couldn't otherwise, or maybe if it's a distance thing or time off work thing or something else, it just extends our reach and ability, and so patients who want to see us that otherwise couldn't can certainly do it that way. So I think it's I mean, we shifted gears quickly and rolled out a platform and managed to get up and going and being able to see patients and keep us kind of, keep a pulse, during kind of this initial height of what's going on, which is good. We have a heartbeat and going to come out stronger, on the back end.
No, that's kind of, and I would agree. And I'd say the same thing on that specific topic, is like this virtual medicine is something we were thinking about doing before COVID. We're doing it during COVID. The back end of COVID, it will make us stronger. Having that tool set is going to make us stronger, and it's going to actually allow us to help more people, period. No question, no doubt. It will. It's going to allow people from farther away to, sort of knock on our door, and we can answer and say, hey, hey, this is what we think is going on with you. We either may or may not be a good resource for you. If so, maybe it is worth it to try it out, and we can, it's just sort of, like I said, it's kind of forced us to think about things differently, and that's not just true with us at Advent. That's going to be true throughout the world. Whatever you do, this is going to have an impact on that, and if you don't embrace it and you don't control it as much as you can control it, that impact's going to be negative. I think on par. I mean, for the most part. And I think if you do try to control it, it may not be positive, but it's sort of it's the choice that you've got to make. And I think, I mean, it's just some of these things they're abstract concepts, but kind of a good opportunity to exercise, or exercise different parts of your brain or an organization.
Right.
So, yeah.
Speaking of perseverance and grit, so have you watched any of The Last Dance? The Michael Jordan series?
Oh yeah.
And it's good timing.
Yeah, it is. Well,
pretty awesome.
It's great. I mean, so we're 4 episodes in at this point. So in real time, 4 episodes. We're basically 2 weeks into that, and then I guess it'll be 3 more weeks. Last 2 episodes, I think both of them, but at least the 3rd episode was a lot about Dennis Rodman.
About the worm.
Which he's
an interesting character, isn't he?
He's the epitome. I mean, he's an interesting character and very multifaceted, but also the epitome of grit, the epitome of taking a reject from society, which he was before he kind of went weird even, and taking, I mean, I think both in the Last Dance, they talked about it a little bit, and then I was reading something about, somebody had went deep in words on how Dennis Rodman approached rebounding and how he approached that one particular facet of basketball differently than anybody's ever approached it. And because he did that with that tenacity and grit, that he was the best rebounder. He is the best rebounder who will likely ever exist, because he took an aspect of basketball that everybody else rejects and
Mhm.
he himself was a reject, and he embraced that and thrived in it. So, I mean, like, I know the whole point of The Last Dance is about Michael Jordan, but I think the other part of that is, you know, Scottie Pippen, you know, Dennis Rodman, the coaches that were around, like all those supporting characters, um, each obviously had their life arcs, and each, you know, Michael Jordan's is the sun in that universe. Period. Everything else revolved around him. Period, including
Right.
Phil Jackson. So, you know, no question about that. But and they talk about this in the Last Dance, is, you know, Michael Jordan needed that supporting cast to do what he did, and without that supporting cast, he couldn't. Now on the flip side, that supporting cast without Michael Jordan couldn't either. So it's just interesting, but
Yeah.
it's grit, and talent. I mean, certainly you personally and me personally, with as much grit as we ever wanted, would never wind up in the NBA. It's just
No,
not going to happen.
I'm
So
open PGA Tour for me, but yes, that's
maybe,
true.
yeah, but I mean, there's grit, and there's also reality, and there's
Yes.
also the application of grit to your life and skill set. And yeah, but it's I mean, I thought it was I mean, so far it's been a really good
Yeah.
good series.
Been a great, yeah, I agree. It's been a great series, and you're right. Everybody plays their role. There's always going to be somebody whose star is shining the brightest, and obviously that's Michael Jordan. But you know, Scottie Pippen. I mean, arguably at any point in time, they could have had the second or third best player in the NBA on that team as well. You know, in Scottie Pippen. Um, and then just thinking about how Phil Jackson. I mean, you know, managing personalities, understanding how to get the best out of everybody, and the team dynamics, and there's just so much. There's so much there that you have to manage,
Yeah,
you know, with the most elite players, and then of course with Jordan being Jordan. But you know, I mean, I don't know what this series. I mean, there's 6 more parts. There's 10 parts. Is that right? So I mean, they've
hmm
kind of gone into each player a bit. You know, going to the coach. I mean, yes, it's about Jordan, but it's not just about Jordan, right?
no,
Uh,
no,
and so it's that last episode. So when they beat the Lakers, and then Magic and Jordan had that moment to kind of like embrace in the hallway, give a hug, and like, yeah, I mean, it's and everybody's like, the only emotion I'd ever seen from Jordan to that point was anger and frustration. That's
sure,
it,
yeah,
you know. And then it shifted, of course, with the championship. But
right, yeah, no, it's I mean, it also, I mean, it's yeah, I mean, it's nostalgic, obviously, because it's looking back on things, but and just sort of, I mean, I think, and obviously it's presenting a narrative in the voice or the lens of those that are, you know, putting the film together.
mhm.
But I would say that at least I'm talking very, very specifically the last couple episodes, is the Pistons walking off the court without shaking hands. Um, I remember it. I mean, I remember that happening back then, but now in retrospect, how bad that looks, and how, and in a way, because those are the bad boys, how I almost, this is going to sound really weird because Isaiah Thomas is apologetic for it at this point.
Yeah,
Bill Lambier is not, and it almost makes me like, I hate Bill Lambier, and I hated the Bad Boys, but it almost like makes me like Bill Lambier more, because he is doubling down on being an asshole. If that makes any sense. Like, I think it's, you
I
know,
mean, he is who he is. He's not apologetic
he's
for
not
it,
apologetic, and
right?
I think, you know, they're, despite what I just said, because I do believe in sportsmanship, I also believe that sports, there's multiple ways to win a game, and most of those are mental. And you know, how do you say this? Playing to the echo of the whistle versus playing dirty, that line is very, very blurry. And I'd say
Mhm.
the Bad Boys and Lambier in particular crossed that line, but then they also won. They won a lot, and that team could only have won using that skill set. They couldn't win any other way than, I mean, dirty, is however you want to call it,
Yeah,
dirty, ready. Like, that's how they had to play, and to win championships playing that sort of a game, and then after the fact apologizing for it, is, I I don't try to think of it. Well, it's hypocritical, because it just is. And so I think that's where, that's why, I mean, thinking about sports in general, and this series makes me think about sports specific to basketball, but I'd say sports in general. That's why I like it so much, is there's so much sort of strategy and so much brutal realness of what it takes to win, and your ability to accept losing or not accept losing, and then the final ultimate reality, which I think why people love sports so much is that the scoreboard doesn't lie. Like,
Right.
you know what I mean? Like, you get cheated at a call, you get this and that happens to you. It's tough luck, buddy. That's what happened.
Right.
And
Right.
did you win the game or did you lose the game? And at the end of the day, I mean, there's multiple Lombardi quotes on it, but it's like, that's it, and so you could be the nice guy that lost the game or the really dirty player that lost. It just and yeah, there's all nuance there. That's why these stories exist, and that's why the books and everything is written about it, because you get to see that played out in front of you. But then I'd say, well, that extrapolates out to real life too, because
Of course.
we're all in our own games. There's not really a scoreboard, so you have this internal score clock or scoreboard about how you think you're doing. But we never really know what that ends. We don't know what that score looks like. We think we know what we think it looks like, versus on a basketball court, you either win, we won or you lost. That's simple.
All right. So then, changing topics slightly to still more sports. What do you think of the Packers draft pick, first draft pick? Where are you on that one?
See, I'm going to take everything today, and this is just where my head's at, probably because of COVID, everything in my mind right now is coming from a mindset that completely discounts the after the fact conclusions, because, now specific to the Packers draft, universally everybody right now, so on April 29th, 2020, mark this down in time. Every single person that has a voice in the world has said this is the worst draft. The Packers have the worst draft in the NFL, period.
Yep.
Nobody has made one comment other than that. Nobody. Okay. Now,
wait a minute. I did see a guy the other day on the NFL who was like, I'm going to go ahead and say I like this pick. And he kind of rolled with it a little bit. No, and the other people were like, no,
Yeah. So here's the deal, or the challenge is, fast forward 3 to 5 years, that's when the story is going to be told. And those people aren't going to be around talking what they say in 3 to 5 years. So actually on draft day, because there's no sports nowadays, I ended up going back. I forget, I was on ESPN and looked back at the drafts from, it was later than 5 years. It's probably the drafts from like 11, 12, 13, 14. And you look down those lists and you look down, and I think I was just focusing on first round, and you read down, okay, 2013, in 2013, the number 1 through 32nd picks. And it is amazing how many of those top picks are no longer playing, or you don't even know. I don't know who they are at this point. And then you think about that. Well, in 2013, these same pundits who right now say the Packers had the worst draft in the history of drafts, back then said that, John Daniels, the number 1 player came off from, he came from Mount Olympus. He's a sure thing, like blah, 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 blah. This team gets an A+ rating because, and back to what I was saying before, would you rather win on draft day, or would you rather win the Super Bowl? And everybody would rather win the Super Bowl, but everybody's focused on, sort of this, the immediate moment. And almost to me, it's an embarrassment. I feel like anybody who's a pundit, I'm embarrassed for every scout, everybody who's part of the NFL, any of those people, because it's almost like the stock market is like, you're picking these things and your livelihood depends on it, and they universally do a horrific job. Like, if you think about that, 32 teams, dozens and dozens of scouts, all these college programs, your whole job is to make the best pick, and they universally chump it. They constantly make the wrong picks in retrospect.
Right.
And nobody ever owns up to that fact.
Ryan Leaf worked out okay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean,
It's true.
yeah.
Yeah. Now I would say, interestingly enough, I think there's probably a little better outcome. Maybe I wouldn't. I have not researched this or looked at the data, but I wonder if that's a little bit easier to do in basketball than it would be in football. I don't know. I mean, baseball. You think about like Moneyball and that whole like analytics that went into it. Like, we don't need these people to sit here and pontificate about who's the best and their internal, kind of feeling about it. It's, let's just look at the data and pick based on that and what kind of team can we create. And
yeah, no,
sometimes that works too.
No, it's interesting, but yeah, a lot of folks retrospectively come to conclusions. But yeah, I'd say like with back to the Packers, we'll see. I mean, this is the thing, like we'll see. And Aaron Rodgers has gotten injured before, and is it good to have like the list of our backup quarterbacks recently is atrocious.
Oh yeah.
And every time Rodgers has gone down,
Absolutely.
it's been embarrassing. And it's basically been like he goes down and season's over. Like, okay, is that what we want? And well, that's what we've chosen. Back when Brett Favre was quarterbacking, they had some really good backup quarterbacks, including Aaron Rodgers.
Right.
Meaning that like, and who knows, maybe there's sort of Aaron Rodgers is getting older, as we all are, but I'd say as he gets older, it's more and more important to have somebody who could step in and do the right thing if the time need be.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe there's like this, I almost could see at some point a bit of a job share a la New Orleans, with Taysom Hill, where you change it up. And like, I'm not saying what is his name? Love is his last name.
Yeah.
The quarterback. But anyway, I'm not saying he's Taysom Hill, but I'm just saying like stranger things have happened that you create an entirely new scheme versus, hey, we're just going to plug this guy in as the backup quarterback. He's going to be the heir apparent to Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers' clock is ticking. He's going to take over. Like, yeah, that might be true. Maybe you groom him behind Aaron Rodgers and then you trade him, if Rodgers is performing great. And then on the flip side, a 36-year-old quarterback in the NFL is a perishable asset that is diminishing or decreasing in value. And so
right.
At some point, yeah, you need to replace Aaron Rodgers, and that cycle is going to go on and on for forever. And so you either put your head in the sand or you say, we're going to need to do this and
right.
we're going to prepare to do this, or you become the Chicago Bears and just decide to just universally.
Yeah, I mean, if you wait until his final season when you absolutely need somebody, then that's a challenge to kind of get what you need. So, and it's a pretty interesting concept that, like, you're right, Taysom Hill plugged in there and threw some great touchdowns and had some good power runs and just other stuff that guy does that's different than Breeze, but it just shifts the game a little bit. And it just changes the pace. There's no reason why you couldn't do that and potentially extend Aaron Rodgers' lifespan, if you wanted to.
No, that's the thing. I mean, like, and if it deserves to be extended, and we'll see. And there's nothing. Let's get back to sports. Like, there's nothing. It's not wrong in saying that. It's not wrong in saying that as Aaron Rodgers gets older, his his abilities are going to decrease at where he is in his career at this point. That's fine. And so you have to plan around that. And either, I mean, if Aaron Rodgers does it, he knows that. He's not an idiot. And so he knows that. He understands that. On the flip side, I'd say Aaron Rodgers, when I've seen him perform his best is when he's got a chip on his shoulder, and that chip has been missing for a while. And so if this, back to now, coming back to Michael Jordan, is those individuals perform at their best when faced with a challenge. And I'd say, should Aaron Rodgers feel challenged by this new quarterback in town? Well, he hasn't been challenged by any quarterback that's been in town since Brett Favre. And so, last time we won a Super Bowl was when Brett Favre was still playing, and those echoes were still in his head. And I'd say, I'm back to, this is on tape, so this is easy right now. I'd say, I would bet just as much that this draft pick sets the Packers up to another Super Bowl victory than the opposite. Because you can't, like, you've got to sports, it's mental, it's also like playing the situation. And if you need, if Aaron Rodgers is the horse that we're riding, and you need to whip him a little bit to get him to push a little harder.
I'm sure he'll appreciate that analogy.
I think he would, honestly.
Saddle him up.
I do. I think if he's, I think if an athlete is so prideful not to recognize that, then they'll never be it.
Right.
You know what I mean? The mental game, I'm thinking just coaching and just that strategy. Yeah, if you're a player who wants to win championships, then you need to you should want to get played in a way. You should want to you should want people to push you to be better. That's
you think his lack of a receiving core is not a challenge enough for him, is what you're saying?
I think it's we'll probably need to move on for the Packers in a bit, but I'd say
yes.
The next Super Bowl that the Packers win is going to look nothing like the last Super Bowl that they won. The next Super Bowl that they win is going to be predicated on probably a defense and a run game and a quarterback that is managing the field. And therefore, your receivers are less important in this new world than they were back then. And I can go Packers forever, but I'm currently, because we got no sports right now, I work out in the morning, and when I work out, I watch sports. Since it's gone, I'm currently watching the 2010 season every game, which is awesome. But watching that season, every single game, and I mean, I remember it vividly, but watching it, that team offensively has no resemblance to this team currently. And people forget that. But I watched a few games from 2009, but those teams were incredible. And you think about the receiver core, like, no, we have no Greg Jennings, Donald Driver, Jones, Jordy Nelson was like the fourth receiver on that team. And then actually, this is perfect for unscripted here, or for adventing here, is Jermichael Finley was awesome. I forget that because he was such a kind of a hothead, but watching him play back in his prime time, man, if we had anything like him these days, that he was a game changer when he was on the field he wasn't on the field for the 2010 season because he got injured like this second or third game. Right. But when he was on the field, he changed the field. And then like, it was ridiculous when he was on the field along with that receiving core, along with like, I'm talking going to 2009, Ryan Grant in the backfield. Like, it was just insane how good that team was. Like, we don't have that. So,
right.
Anyway,
the last team to kind of do it based on that was like, you think about Denver Broncos, and when Peyton Manning won a Super Bowl with them, that was the blueprint. It was a game managing defense and a run game.
Yeah. All right. Last Packers tidbit, and then we'll move on.
Yeah. Okay.
We're driving everybody crazy here, I'm sure. Did you see this? Did you see the stat with Aaron, or this? Yeah, it's a stat with Aaron Rodgers that it's like the top 10 quarterbacks, or the 10 quarterbacks who've thrown the most touchdowns in their careers.
Yes.
You saw that one?
Yep.
That is incredible. So in his career, he has a grand total of one touchdown pass thrown to a first-round draft pick in his career. And everybody else, Peyton Manning is like 280 something, or it's crazy, which is like, because if you think about all of our receiving core for the Packers, none of them are first-round picks. None, like, Devontae Adams, no. Nelson, no. Driver was like a 7th-round pick, no.
Who's the one?
I think it was. I wanted to look that up. I don't know. I thought it was Eddie Lacy, but I thought he was a 2nd-round pick, but he could have been a 1st. But that's why I want to know. I was like, who is the one? I read a couple articles on it that it didn't. I can't remember if they mentioned it or not. I'll have to look it up. Yeah. But I think it's Eddie Lacy, and that's, if he was a 1st-round pick, it sounds about right.
Sense.
He didn't catch that much. He was usually running it, but it was just interesting. But yeah, I guess we'll move on from the Packers. I think by.
Yes. What's next?
Let's see here. All right, we probably should go back to the medical domain. Let's see. Gosh, what have we not covered with previous ones of these?
Let's see.
Oh, I got one. All right.
All right,
Think. I think it's just a random thought in my head, which is like, so sleep apnea, is that the word on the street is that sleep apnea is caused because you're too heavy. True, false, and then explain. And then I will disagree, and I'm going to come at you hard. So whatever answer you have.
So be ready.
Yeah.
Can I hedge all components of this? Sleep apnea occurs in people who are heavy, but certainly it's not the only reason why somebody has sleep apnea. So stated another way, people who are skinny can have sleep apnea. Mm-hmm. People who are fat or obese can have sleep apnea.
Yep.
I think the heavier a person is, or the more higher their BMI or whatever calculation you want to use, the higher the risk for sleep apnea is. But certainly, a skinny person is not immune to have that disease or develop it.
Okay. Well, you said a lot of words, but didn't say much. But anyway, so I still don't know your answer. But so here's the real answer. Okay. So your skinny person and your heavy person, the common thread between those two is that their airways are narrowed.
Correct.
Right? All right.
Yes.
So I guess here's it's not a hypothesis, it's the truth, is that you personally, if do you want to have sleep apnea?
Me? I'd rather not. Yeah.
You'd rather not. But if you wanted to have sleep apnea, you could cause yourself to have sleep apnea by, eating 12,000 Twinkies and ding dongs and putting on a ton of weight. Anybody can create that situation. Mm-hmm. So you currently likely don't have sleep apnea, but you could become somebody who has sleep apnea by narrowing your airway by gaining weight.
Correct.
Flip it around, and then I'd say, okay, fine, and I believe that. Then flip it around, and I'd say, okay, well, what if somebody is born or predisposed to have a narrow airway, and that makes it difficult for them to breathe during the day and at night, mm-hmm. and that nighttime breathing causes them to have sleep apnea or just struggle to breathe at night, so that they sleep poorly. Then that person is more likely to gain weight during the day because they're not as active as they maybe otherwise would want to be. And everybody that I know that's an actual human being, when they sleep poorly, they eat like crap. And so you eat like crap. So when I sleep poorly, if I'm either working or whatever, and I don't get a good night's sleep, I tend to either not work out the next day or have a crummy workout, just draggy. And then when I'm choosing what I eat, I choose really horrible things, generally speaking, and that cycle causes I think in the uninitiated, because the dude the dude or the gal who's got a narrow airway doesn't know they have a narrow airway, but they just walk around like life, zombified and reaching for the whatever sitting in front of them because it's better than the alternative kind of a thing. Then they're going to gain weight, and then magically, narrow airway guy or gal becomes heavy narrow airway guy or gal, and then they go to their doctor, and their doctor says, "Hey, heavy." They don't know about their airway. "Hey, heavy person, you look heavy. I think you might have sleep apnea. Do the sleep study." You do a sleep study, and the sleep study comes back that you have sleep apnea. And then your doctor says, "Dude, you're fat and you have sleep apnea. You did this to yourself. Shame on you." They don't say that out loud, but they'll say that with their words, or they'll say that with their pauses and their attitude between the words.
Right.
And they'll intone the fact that you have caused an issue for yourself. And then they'll skip through a lot of steps, and then they'll say, because you're fat and because you have sleep apnea, here's this machine that that you need to use. Like, it's like your punishment is how this is all, kind of caged. And they're going to say, use this thing, give it a shot, whatever, and, try this and see how it goes. And then, as we know, most people who go through the normal model do really, really poorly with sleep apnea treatments because it's all gets predicated on these superficial jumps to conclusions that aren't really accurate. And long story short, I'd say that person like I said before, yes, some people create sleep apnea for themselves whole cloth because of the
Hmm.
lifestyle choices. Flip side, I'd say I would venture to bet or say that most adults who have sleep apnea and are heavy started with an airway issue before their heaviness, and this underlying airway issue created the extra weight on them that made the sleep apnea worse. Meaning that I'd say, and there's no way to really prove this, and so it's easy for
Right.
me to say, but I do believe this, is that the person who's heavy who has sleep apnea, the heaviness may be a byproduct of an underlying issue versus a visualization to the world about the cause of that issue. So sleep apnea could be just as causative for over somebody who's being overweight or somebody is overweight as being overweight is causative for sleep apnea. Maybe that's the simpler way to say it. So that's that's what I believe.
Yeah, I think I think the truth is probably that and somewhat, because then how do you explain the patient that loses weight and their sleep apnea goes away? So, that patient probably doesn't have unfavorable underlying anatomy, or their airway isn't narrow and they lose weight and they are fine and don't need their CPAP machine anymore and sleep great. So, but the realist in me thinks that, the stupidest thing and the thing that annoys me the most is patients that get prescribed weight loss, and so, I mean, I guess here's a question. Do you believe that all patients who are, let's say, obese with sleep apnea will be better served, not for a variety of health reasons, but directly to their sleep apnea, that it's more likely than not that they can improve those numbers with weight loss?
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. Though, and I say this to every patient who'll listen to me say this to, is that it is really hard to lose weight, period.
Absolutely. 100%.
And I would pretty well venture that, I wouldn't say it's impossible to lose weight if you have severe sleep apnea, but I would say it's probably pretty darn near impossible to lose weight without treating sleep apnea if you have
Correct.
severe sleep apnea. So then I would go back to, yeah, I mean, weight loss, whether you snore, have mild, moderate, or severe sleep apnea, weight loss, if you have extra weight on your body, is going to help you, period. Even if you've got the most genetically narrowed down airway in the world.
Right.
But the proper sequence to doing that is identify the airway issue, treat that airway issue, allow somebody to sleep properly, recognize the elephant in the room. Sorry for the pun or whatever you want to call it. You know
Yes.
what I mean? So recognize the fact that weight is not your friend, but recognize you're only going to win that battle if we can get you breathing properly during the day and night. And so I think as a part of an overall game plan, yeah, absolutely. We had to address the airway, get you sleeping properly, have a strategy to get the weight off on the back end, and then you kind of go back down the cycle, or the other way in the cycle is, well, okay, we identify the issue, treat the sleep apnea, you're sleeping better, feeling better, you lose the weight. Oh, wow, that weight loss has improved your airway. We retest your sleep apnea or retest you to see if you have sleep apnea. And it is possible and sometimes probable that you've now resolved the issue. And that's a good thing. And then you
Right.
get rid of if you're on a CPAP machine or using an oral appliance, get rid of that thing because you don't need it. And then on the flip side, well, you know how that little rodeo went. And so if you gain weight down the road, we're going to go right back in that same direction.
Right.
Um, yeah, I mean, and though that's easy. Now I'd say yes, to answer the kind of the point of that is if somebody truly was able to eliminate their sleep apnea with weight loss, then their sleep apnea was directly related to weight. And, maybe they still have a somewhat narrow airway, but maybe it's now passable. So, I guess that's what I would say. I think
Yeah.
there's definitely a gray zone, and most people are in the gray zone.
Well, I
I
think
guess.
conceptually too, it's hard, it's hard to explain to a patient that, when they think of their neck, they think of the outside of the neck. Like you look at yourself in the mirror and this is the size of my neck here. And it's trying to explain and conceptualize, it's a tube with an inside circle and an outside circle. And there's all that meat that's in between,
Yep.
and that weighs down on things and that collapses the inside of that tube. And so the thicker your neck is in that meaty portion, the more likely it is to collapse that airway. And so, then patients, I think, what they start to understand conceptually, okay, well, let's widen that inner circle, by losing weight in my neck and what that means. And I think the difference too here is that we really try to be a patient advocate along that pathway versus kind of an adversarial type doctor-patient relationship, because certainly patients, like you said, like, hey, the last thing they want to hear when they go in and they're obese is lose weight, come back and talk to me and when you're 30 pounds lighter and here's a CPAP machine. Like, that's freaking pointless, and that's not helping anybody. And it's annoying to hear that that's done. And I empathize with patients. And, again, I think most patients that probably walk in here that are obese, probably one, are aware of that, two, would rather not be if they had a choice,
Sure.
And it's a challenge. And so if we can get people sleeping better, like you said, if they're motivated, you have to be motivated. The weight just doesn't come off by itself. But if we get them better sleep and they're motivated and we can give them hope that we can move these numbers in the right direction, we don't promise anything, but at least it can only help. Let's get them rested and get them sleep and get these treatment options working better for them so that maybe if they have a goal of coming off their CPAP machine, they can achieve it where there was no way in hell they were going to do it before.
Yeah, no, I'd agree. I mean, I think that's where, our approach is, well, I guess it's every doc and every APP with us has their own slightly different approach, but I'd say our approach is one perspective of approach. But honestly, I'll take our approach. I'll take our approach up against anybody else. Not that we're like all that. It's just, I guess what I would say, our approach is the approach. It's like an everyman approach. It's the approach that I would want if I have sleep apnea. It's the approach that I would want my mom to be. I guess to boil it down and just from my perspective on like, well, what is that approach? The approach is dealing in realities versus like hypotheticals, dealing with real people, with real problems, with real bodies and real wishes versus some theoretical, hypothetical construct that doesn't actually exist. And being frank with people and being, sort of frank, truthful, and actionable, meaning presenting pathways that can get us to where we want to be, and being truthful about that. So sometimes for some individuals, it could be, we could go down this road or this road, and both of them are going to end up in the same place. It's just a matter of how you want to go about it. Versus sometimes it's we could go down this road, and every other road is going to get you nowhere near where the preferred road is. And if for whatever reason the preferred road is impassable, we might need to think about these other options. That's similar conversation, but it's entirely different. And it's really just us synthesizing the information, us producing that information in a manner that's understandable, and then walking somebody through the option list of these are the things you could do. And that's all great. And I'd say if all we ever did was just that, I think that's a service. But I think then that how we really earn our keep is then delivering on those game plans. And so if we're talking about a game plan, then talk is cheap, but results are what matters. And so talk about something. And again, at this point, we this is all we do. All we do is treat airway issues. That's it. So we better be pretty good at it. And I'd say I think we do a decent job, or as decent a job as we can possibly do at it. And so. Right. But the proof of that, is in the results. It's in the results, but it's also partnering with somebody in the quest to achieve those results in a collaborative way versus and not to knock any other doctor, any APP, or anything else. It's not my intent to do that, but I would say I didn't get. So I think the manner in which we sort of try to treat our patients is with the mindset I just described, which is not the typical mindset, and it's not the typical, it's not how we're taught in medical school. It's not, nobody sits down and talks about things in that frank of manner. It's all sort of more theoretical, and then a lot of what we do and learn and end up doing in practice is based on modeling from other docs that we're seeing. But again, we were talking about sports earlier, and I think just like sports, you need to sort of participate in the event, but you need to practice to participate. You need to think about it and work on your skills and techniques before you get to the game. Then you need to participate in that game to the best of your abilities, and then you need to deconstruct it on the back end and understand what went wrong. You need to watch the tape. You need to watch the tape in your mind about what went wrong with a procedure, if it was a procedure, or right. I mean, it could be right or wrong, doesn't matter either way. But same thing with a visit, and that's where I feel like how we approach our patients and how we approach medicine. I think that's a differentiating factor where I mean, it's not like we sit there with our helmets on and talk like I just said, but I think conceptually it is the same thing. Conceptually, it's having a game plan for how we're going to approach each visit and each procedure if the procedure is necessary, but also having a game plan on how each individual patient is going to be managed. And that's, I don't know how that is something that's important and crucial. And I think there are a lot of people who are practicing medicine and doing similar things that way, but aren't conscious of that, and to their detriment. I think if you're not conscious of it, you don't respect sort of the nuances that are there, you can't try to continue to sort of elevate your skill set. So
right. Yeah. I mean, we don't, victim mentality and things, like I feel like we try our best to not let patients fall into kind of that mindset, and we can be, again, their partner and advocate. And, yes, there are victims, but that mentality and being able to fight what they have going on. And if it's sleep apnea, how do we overcome and achieve this? So much of, well, you did this, and this is our only option. And then they fail a CPAP machine. It's like, they're now a victim of something, right?
Yeah.
So versus, hey, no, like this is the game plan. This is the approach, like you said, and these are the steps that we're going to take. It's going to go in this order because this has the best chance of success
Right.
for you. But they have to be a willing and active participant and
Absolutely.
be proactive. So, again, victim or not, no, you need to be part of this, but we have a proven way time and time again with patients that have had success, and our data backs this up, but like we do a pretty good job of getting patients over the goal line.
Yeah. Although I think this will be a last topic here, but it's a separate topic, so I'm going to introduce it as such, but it relates to what I was just talking about before, which is the concept, the reality, the question. I guess it's a question. I'm going to pose it as a question. I'm trying to think of the best way to phrase this question. I guess the question really is do you fail your patients sometimes? Do you fail to achieve the outcomes? I'm trying to find the right wording around this, but are there patients that you treat that don't get the outcomes that they were hoping for?
Yes.
And me, absolutely, every day of the week. And how can you be okay with that? How is that acceptable? And because I guess my point here is I think there is a lot of thought out in the world because nobody ever talks about this particular topic, which is this concept. We were just talking a little bit earlier about the concept of partnering with patients to develop a treatment plan, engaging them in the process, and then really, how we're measured is on results. And walking through that thought process, the first premise is that most of the time, the large majority of the time, like almost always, we can get somebody where they need to be, coming down the pathway that we described.
Right.
Now, though, there are times where that doesn't happen. And when it doesn't happen, it could be a variety of things. Sometimes it's decisions that we make as clinicians. Sometimes it's decisions that patients make as patients. And sometimes it's the luck of the draw. And sometimes it's the reality that we are human beings and our patients are human beings. And, despite our best intentions, sometimes there's nothing that, sometimes we're not going to get over the goal line. Sometimes we know that sometimes we know that when we get the ball to begin with or get the situation to begin with, and we know we are never going to get over the goal line here. It doesn't mean we don't try to go down the field. It just means we have to understand what we're going to measure our success on. On the other hand, I'd say there are times where we have full intention of getting somebody where we want them to be, and we just don't get them there. And right. That too happens. But I would say definitively, and this probably doesn't need to be said, but I would say I think it almost does need to be said, is there isn't a time where we fail somebody by not trying our hardest to get them where they need to be, if that makes sense. So I think at the end of the day, I kind of ask it as a question. I'm answering it for myself, is how I can come to terms with the fact that, sometimes we fail, sometimes we don't win, sometimes we don't achieve the results that we want, is that I know in my heart of hearts that I've approached it in the best manner possible, theoretically or from a concept standpoint. And then from an actual procedural standpoint, I am doing things to the best of my abilities, and my abilities are pretty good. You know what I'm saying? Right. I know I've got a good skill set. I know I can do things well. It doesn't mean you can do them perfectly, but I can do things well. And I'm also human, and the world is real and flawed. And even despite all those things, that sometimes things happen, but I personally don't think I've never failed anybody by pulling up short, by not bringing my every last ounce of effort. Like, that's never happened. And so I think once I learned to understand that, then you learn to not want failure, but you learn to accept failure as a byproduct of practicing.
Right. Medicine, and in progress in general. I mean, it's like, we've had these conversations quite a bit over the years, but if you embody every failure and it breaks you down and it freezes you from doing what you need to do, you'll never progress in anything, and so it can't be that way. And so it doesn't make those conversations easier with patients. I mean, you talk about complications. There's not a surgeon in this world that's had a complication, or that has not had a complication. We all have. That's part of operating, and it's part of risk that comes with that, with the specialty in the game, and that's what it is. But it can't paralyze you, And so, and I share that recent story with you about, my wife, who's in a very small subspecialty niche, and there's these pediatric cardiothoracic surgeons that operate on small, tiny baby hearts and crazy procedures. And it was all about how different academic centers are measured, or these big centers are measured on outcomes. And of course, outcomes are bad in certain instances where new procedures are tried that had never been tried before, with the effort of trying to save a child's life or something, Mm-hmm. And the reality is, you have to take risks. And you have to have failures to get to a better place with better outcomes. But you can't just be measured on your failures, because again, that's part of progress with everything that we do in life, but especially in what we do. We can't be perfect. And I tell patients outright, like, it's easier for me to tell a patient, I'm not perfect. Like, will this work for me? What percentage increase am I going to be better? Well, one, breathing is subjective in the sense you do or you don't. And then there's everything that's in between that, right? Mm-hmm. And then it's just a matter of being forthright and honest and frank out the gate, is like, look, I'm going to do everything I can to do as best I can a job in whatever setting that we're doing it. Operating room, procedure suite in the office, whatever it might be. I'm not 100%, but I have a pretty good sense that we're going to be able to get you over the goal line, and I feel like that's honest and it's authentic.
Yeah. Well, and kind of paraphrasing what you said, I'm going to ask you this question. Have you ever offered a guarantee to somebody?
Never.
Nor have I. So I think, you know,
You
sometimes,
know,
you know, you'll hear things or read things and like, you know, I honestly, I can't guarantee that I'm going to wake up tomorrow morning. You know, what I mean, I can't guarantee anything. I can't guarantee. There's no guarantee. There are no guarantees in life, none.
I mean,
And
you can
so,
guarantee that you will try your best to get them as good as they can, you know,
yeah,
like kind of what you're alluding to, right? Like,
yeah,
hey, I'm going
yeah.
to try as hard as I can to get you over the goal line. That I can promise you know, because that's true. But
And I'd say, you know, if you're the guy or gal who didn't get over the goal line, you know, how do you say this? Um, you know, I get it too. Like I don't know that
sucks.
it sucks. I mean, it sucks for everybody,
Yeah.
but unless somebody, I guess and this is not just for us or just admin, but it's and I think there are, but I don't think there are many, but I think if there's a surgeon or whatever medical practitioner that's actively trying to, you know, harm somebody
Yes.
that's a different story, and that's not at
Sure.
all what we're talking about. Yeah, that's an entirely different thing. But I'd say if somebody is, you know, has the right skill set, brings that skill set with the right effort, and outcome isn't what it wants, you know, what we're hoping for, that sucks. It does, and it's but it happens,
And
and despite the best of anybody's, you know, wishes or wishing it away, it's going to continue to happen. And the only way to avoid that is to not do anything, which is, you know, ridiculous. Because then you get back to this premise of, you know, depending on what we're talking about. But I'd say for the majority of our procedures, I'd say the odds of success are in the high 90% range. You know, it's not 100%, but we're not talking, you know, 50%. We're not talking
right,
90%. We're talking like almost 10 out of 10 people, not 10 out of 10, but almost. So like maybe 9 out of 10 or nine, some portion of a person out
right.
of 10 times, we're going to get somebody where they need to be. And that's the thing I would focus on. You know, but it sucks if you're that 1/10 of a person
Right.
that didn't get there, and it doesn't make it any better. But I'd say, you know, on the front end, back to kind of complete this thought, I'd say, yeah, I mean, you know, that's though that is the situation that somebody's signing up for, you know, like it or not. And if somebody's looking for a guarantee, then they better not look to me or to you, because they're not going to get one.
No.
You know, if somebody's looking for, you know, the best skill set that we can deliver and the best effort we can deliver to get somebody where they need to be, okay, we'll sign up for that, because I mean we got that one. And so I think that's something. I mean, it sounds a bit, when you say it out loud and you talk about it like we've been talking about it, it almost sounds sort of ridiculous. But then the reason I say it out loud is because I don't know that I've ever actually heard it said out loud
Right.
in the real world. People
And
talk
and there's
about
an
sort of things, but they don't really talk about sort of some of these difficult things.
well, and there's an expectation certainly that physicians, I don't want to say are perfect, but that doctors in medicine, that there's an exact science to it, and just there isn't.
Mm-mm.
Like there isn't, you know, even in this day and age, you know, I mean, COVID's a perfect example. Like, hey, you'd think that all these biologists and scientists and like we would be able to analyze this thing and knock out a vaccine and a treatment in like a heartbeat. And still with all of the skill set and knowledge that we have now in technology, it still ain't happening, you know, at this point in time. And so, you know, it's so cliche, but medicine is an art, you know, it's not
Yeah.
a science. And so, you know, and it, like you were saying, you know, if we do 1,000 procedures across all of our locations and, you know, 950 patients are probably going to be doing pretty awesome. 50 of them may not be if it's 5%, you know, and those are sucky conversations to have. That's true. It is. And you have to be able to have those conversations and honor those conversations because they're conversations that need to be had and it's real. Um, but you have to get back up and keep going, you know, and because you're doing a lot more good than bad. That's for
Yeah.
sure.
Absolutely. All right. I think that's all we have for today. So until next time, we'll see you.
Yeah. All righty. Dr. Handler here. Just want to say thank you to you know, all the healthcare workers out there on the front lines. You know, this is doctors, nurses, really anybody engaging in the current kind of climate and COVID situation. But you know, it's not just them, it's anybody who's essential. And what does that even mean? I mean, we're all essential in a way, but people are pulling weight and helping society. I just want to say thank you to all those out there putting in their efforts.
Perfect. Yeah, and I got my own shout out, and it's actually a shout out to the Advent team, which has pulled together massively during this COVID situation on multiple fronts. Like every single aspect of Advent has had to reinvent itself almost overnight, given the situation at hand, and that's taken a lot of work, a lot of effort. Put together a virtual visit or a telemedicine program almost literally overnight, which has been a remarkable add to our ability to help people. So it's been a really, really wonderful thing. And, it's just, I mean, it's part of why I love being part of Advent so much is that, it's constantly changing, constantly striving to get better. And, everybody's part of that. So, well, that's all we got for today. Thank you for watching and listening. If you are watching us on YouTube, please subscribe to our channel. Maybe give us a like down below. That'd be nice. If you're listening to us in audio form, please review us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts and give us some feedback there. Take care.